Hi, and welcome back to Instavision. I'm Glenn Reynolds. Well, F.A. Hayek wrote The Road to Serfdom, and that was a pretty influential book. But our current guest, AEI President Arthur Brooks, has written a new book called The Road to Freedom. And to be honest, I think I'd rather be on your road than on Hayek's, my respect for Hayek notwithstanding. Welcome, Arthur.
Hi, Glenn. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's good to have you here. So, what do Americans need to know about free enterprise now as we move toward November's elections?
Well, the most important thing for us to remember right now is that the main reason we're tending to lose a lot of arguments is because we've been failing not to make the practical case. I mean, virtually everybody understands that free enterprise makes us the richest society in the history of the world. But we've been failing to make the moral case. The President of the United States and various other politicians have been making a concerted moral attack on the legitimacy, on the fairness, on the way that the free enterprise system can lift up the poor. And it's actually landing some punches. This year and the years to come, if we're going to turn the system around, if we're going to get off effectively the road to serfdom, which I believe for various reasons that we're on, we're going to have to start making the moral case for free enterprise. That's a hard thing to do for guys like me. I mean, I've been an economist for a long time, and it's easy for me to go straight to the data, straight to the facts. But it's time for me and a lot of other people to start speaking from the heart a little bit more.
Well, the thing about the road to serfdom is that while there are a lot of serfs at the end of that road, there's also some lords and counts and barons and people of Obama's ilk, I think, see themselves living up in the castle while the little people hoe the fields, all in the name of fairness, of course. And I think that's a pretty important point to make, that all this talk about fairness and equality is about equality among the serfs. The real 1% are the ones who control political power.
Yeah, sure enough. And the biggest problem is that the whole definition of fairness turns out to be spurious that we're hearing. When the president or any other politician tells you that we need greater fairness, which is to say we need to take more from the top echelons of our society, to take more from the entrepreneurial class, what he's basically saying is that that fairness means spreading the wealth. Fairness means less income inequality per se. But the trouble with that is that most Americans, to be exact, about 90% of Americans believe that the true definition of fairness, the correct definition of fairness, is a society that rewards merit and creates opportunity. And most Americans believe that the free enterprise system is the system that creates that true fairness. The reason we lose the argument to those who want to redistribute wealth is because they're the ones who show up for the argument and talk about fairness. We've had the whole idea beat out of us a little bit. You know, St. Milton Friedman told us along the way that we shouldn't even discuss the subject of fairness. But I don't think that that's very good advice. I think that we have to take the game to the people who would define it wrong.
You know, honestly, I think what we need is more name calling. That's worked for the left for years, and I think the proper response is to call them moochers, to say they're trying to steal your money, that they're lazy, and that they want to live fat off other people's efforts, and just ram it down their throats. Personally, that's my take. But you probably got a more measured approach as an economist. Well, what's your take on that?
Well, my thinking is that who we really want to win today. I mean, look, I share your sentiments that talking about a society of makers and takers really is satisfying to the true believers, guys like me. But I think that to get to the persuadables, we have maybe a little bit more nuance might do the trick. And I think to talk to the persuadables, we have to use the overtly positive moral language of earned success, for example, that we believe in a society in which people can create value, in which we believe in the dignity of the individual, and that the evidence clearly shows that a statist society doesn't deliver that we want true fairness, and we're dedicated to lifting up the most vulnerable. And the free enterprise system is the best system for doing those positive moral things.
You say it, but honestly, name calling and bullying has worked pretty well for the left, it seems to me. But let's move on. What interesting quote you make is you actually quote Andy Warhol, of all people, on the leveling effect, the pro-equality effect of a consumerist capitalist society. Tell us a little about that.
Well, Andy Warhol made the observation, the common sense observation, that the free enterprise system is incredibly leveling socially. And he talked about a Coca-Cola. He said, look at a Coca-Cola. Everybody likes Coke and everybody drinks the same can of Coke. You know, the president of the United States, he said Liz Taylor, she was still alive when he wrote this in the 70s, and the bum on the corner, they're all drinking the same can of Coke. He said that is the fruit of the free enterprise system. We all get the good stuff. And, you know, okay, so what? Maybe you don't like Coke, but let's take it to an example that makes more sense. In the United States, even if you're relatively poor, you probably have a car. You can get back and forth to work. Now, you might be driving a cheap used Toyota as opposed to a brand new BMW, but there's the differences between those two cars is really not that great. The miracle of the free enterprise system is the bounty that is created for so many people. And when we actually start talking about bringing the top down, penalizing the entrepreneurial class, getting fairness, which is leveling for the sake of equality, who are we going to hurt? We're going to hurt the guy driving the Toyota. And this is what we've seen all around the world. Free enterprise around the globe, globalization, free trade, all this stuff that the left loves to hate. These things are the reason that we've eradicated 80% of the world's worst poverty since 1970. It's not because of the United Nations, and it's not because of global foreign aid or the International Monetary Fund. It's because people are trading with each other, because entrepreneurs are empowered and have world markets. 600 million Chinese have been lifted out of poverty. They're not dying today since 1980, and the reason is because of trade with the United States. If we're good Samaritans, if we love the poor, and not just so they can have a can of Coke, but rather so they can feed their families, we must be in favor of the free enterprise system.
But the free enterprise system doesn't put power in the hands of politicians, and it doesn't offer sufficient opportunities for graft. I think until we can address that, it's never going to win over the political class.
Well, it's a tough thing when you're asking people to sacrifice their own power. It's true. And that explains how we've had such a bipartisan, effective conspiracy in this country to lead us down this road to serfdom, to virtual servitude to the government. When my own institution, the American Enterprise Institute, was formed in 1938, it was formed basically in protest against the fact that the government at all levels was soaking up 15% of American GDP. Actually, that level sounds pretty darn good these days because it's 36% right now. And by 2038, according to the Congressional Budget Office, it'll be 50%. So Glenn, you and I and everybody watching us is going to be working from January 1st to June 30th to pay for government we don't even like. That's real serfdom, and that's a bipartisan gift from Republicans and Democrats. The practical case for free enterprise is simply not going to mobilize enough people to stand up with basically the torches and pitchforks against the politicians that are doing this to us. We must have the moral case. We must have an ethical populism that says the country that we want for our kids and grandkids, for true fairness, to lift up the poor, to be a beacon of hope for the world, will not come under the current system.
Well, last question. What should viewers do between now and November?
What viewers need to do between now and November is redouble their dedication to hold their politicians to account. A lot of people are making a whole lot of promises right now, and the biggest danger is not that politicians on the left are going to win. The biggest danger is that politicians on the so-called right will win, and then they'll go native. We must, as responsible citizens, according to our founders, hold our politicians to account. And that means working hard with renewed energy in the process today, this year, and even more in 2013 and 2014. Your fans, Glenn, are going to have to be listening to what you have to say in 2013 to call their politicians to account every bit as much as this year.
Absolutely, and we've certainly seen the Tea Party movement work at that, and we're continuing to see it happen in some of the primaries, but you can never strike enough fear into these people, can you?
That's right. More fear.
That's our slogan, more fear in 2012 and 2013. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn. It's wonderful to be with you, as always.
Well, that's Arthur Brooks, author of The Road to Freedom and president of the American Enterprise Institute. Between now and November, and after November as well, hold their feet to the fire. It's what they need. Well, thanks for tuning in to us. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.